I'm Marla Holt. I am a contemporary romance author, and today I have a brand new series for you. We are going to be spending at least one of my 2 weekly videos for the next few weeks talking about how to write a romance novel. We are going to be talking about everything from developing your characters to creating a believable conflict. We're going to talk about how to write a meet cute. We're going to talk about how to write a sex scene. We're going to talk about everything that's involved in how to write a romance novel. And I just wanted to talk to you guys today about how to get started and what to think about when you start putting together your very first romance novel. If you aren't a romance author, that's okay. If you don't want to be a romance writer, if that's not your genre, that's great too. All of this information can honestly be used in writing any sort of book, especially if there's a romantic subplot. So stay tuned. Right now we're going to talk about what you need to think about when establishing a romance novel or establishing a romance plot in your book, and what exactly I mean when I'm talking about a romance novel, just as a way to establish what a good foundation for what we're going to be talking about in subsequent videos. So, for discussion purposes, a romance novel is not just a love story. That is a gross oversimplification. I feel like that doesn't give enough credit to all of the nuance that goes into a really well thought out romance novel. So what the definition we are going to use of a romance novel is, and I have it written down, so I'm going to read it so I get it right, is a study of two round, robust characters as they are on their journey to forming a lasting long-term relationship. And that sounds very textbook style, I know, but that is essentially what a romance novel is. It starts out with two unique characters that come from very different backgrounds usually, or I mean, even if they're from similar backgrounds, they have some fundamental differences about their lives that make their coming together difficult in some way. And it could be, yeah, there's usually some sort of conflict in life circumstances. There's often like a socioeconomical conflict, or there's some sort of imbalance in power that has to be overcome for them to form a successful relationship. So there's work involved. There always has to be work involved. They can't just meet and fall in love and then everything's hunky-dory, because that would be, one, really boring, and two, super short. So if we're aiming for like a 60 to 80,000 word romance novel, you're going to want to have a little bit more conflict going on there. So you're going to want to start off with two fully fleshed, flawed characters with fantastic page chemistry. That is also a requirement. If nobody believes your characters like each other, or they don't have enough personality for people to like get into their witty conversation, people aren't going to read your story or read your book or believe them as a couple. So that is where I always start when I'm starting to write a book. I always start with figuring out who my hero and heroine are, since I write hetero romance, but you know, your hero and hero, your heroine and heroine, whoever you're writing, like, so you're going to want to start out fleshing out these characters really well, whatever your method of character development is. I like to just figure out who my characters are in my head at first, and then sit down and I do things that I call sketches. I don't actually draw out characters. I just put them in a room together and like make them talk, like make them go out to breakfast together or have dinner, or like, yeah, just put them on a date essentially and make them interact and see, sort of get the feel for like what about each of them makes the other tick. And then that's where I start developing my story. So I do my character development on the page, but you do what your character development is, and then move on from there. The second thing that a romance novel needs to have outside of its fully fleshed out characters is a believable central conflict. Usually this is going to have something to do with the backgrounds that the characters come from, the reasons why they're being together are difficult, instead of it's not usually going to be like a big like they're not going to be separated by distance because they need to be together to get to know each other and fall in love. They're not going to be separated by like outside influences a lot of the time, unless you're writing like a period piece and there's some like propriety thing going on. But even then, like in period pieces, they usually find a way around that. I don't know. So there's a conflict that's going to stem from their circumstances and who they are as people. That is more than like, it's not going to be like a man versus God conflict. It's gonna be like their own insecurities or coming into play with other parts of the storyline. Basically, is usually what you're going to be going for, but something believable and not too melodramatic. There's always room for old lovers and assholes who are trying to sabotage one character or another for their own motivation, but you don't want to go too overboard with it. You don't want it to become a soap opera. It still needs, like, even your periphery characters still need to be people. The third thing a romance novel needs to have is sexual tension, specifically between the two main characters. If you don't have to have full-on sex scenes, there's plenty of people who write clean romance, but if there's not like that spark of the reader wanting them to like kiss or touch or just acknowledge their feelings for one another in some way, and physical touches are a great way of peeking into a character's mind even when they're not being obvious to themselves. So developing a sense of sexual tension throughout the narrative is nearly imperative. It's more important than having a sex scene. We will talk about sex scenes, and I do write sex scenes in my books, but you don't have to have them in any romantic subplot or in any romance novel. It doesn't have to have them. If you want to do them, though, that's coming down the pipeline. But more important than the sex scene is going to be the sexual tension, the anticipation of building up how much these characters care about each other, and sort of that that desire of wanting them to get together and wanting them to acknowledge their feelings for one another in a meaningful way. And small touches and things like that also will add to that throughout, even if they're not being explicitly open about their feelings at some points in the book. There's still ways to build sexual tension, and that's going to keep the reader engaged in these characters and their journey, as well as help the writer stay on track with getting them to where they want to be. The fourth thing that a romance novel needs is mutual character growth. So both of those two main characters need to be growing together, so that the obstacles that they need to overcome to be full romantic partners are seen less of a complication and more of something that's not a big deal, because it's more important to be together. So there needs to be this growth over time from the beginning. Like at the beginning, usually there's some hesitancy to enter into a relationship because of these conflicts that they have, because of where they come from and what's going on in their lives. And they need to mutually sort of start to overcome those conflicts together. There needs to be a mutual growth at the same time. And they don't have to be perfectly timed, because then some of your tension would go away. But they need to grow. They need to both grow throughout the story, so that they come to see their relationship or possible relationship as less of a hassle and more of something that they're willing to fight for. So if your characters aren't growing, or if they're just coming from a place that's like readily being open to a relationship, then you've got to have another conflict going on. You've got to have something separate them. And then have them work to get back together. So there's obviously different ways you can work that conflict in, but you have to have them both growing and changing throughout the book. They can't be stagnant, otherwise the story's not going to work very well. So there needs to be mutual growth throughout the book and character development as the book moves along. The fifth thing you need to have is usually about 3/4 of the way through the book, you want to keep that page turning, and you want to have a conflict that has developed so much so that the characters and the reader feels like there's no way out, that they are not going to make this work, that everything has been in vain, and they've got a lot of fighting to do and a lot of work to do to make things work out the way they want, and it almost seems impossible. But then you, as the writer, get to spend the next 25% of the book wrapping it up and making it to the last thing a romance novel needs, which is a happily ever after. And by happily ever after, which I talked a little bit about in my modern fairy tale video, which I will link right up here above, I don't necessarily mean like a wedding and riding off into the sunset or something. I just mean that these two characters are ready to move into a long-term lasting relationship. That is what I mean by happily ever after. And that is usually in modern romance novels and contemporary romance novels, especially, that is the definition. We don't have as many people getting married and having babies in our modern romance novel, just because that isn't necessarily everybody's fulfillment. So your happily ever after is going to be dependent on where your characters are in their life and what makes them find fulfillment. So whether that's getting married, whether that's, having children, whether that's, moving to Paris and setting up a patisserie, I don't know, like whatever it is, they're doing it together. And that's what matters. Obviously, a romance novel takes a lot more than just these few things to put together. There's a lot more nuance. There's a lot more character development than just we've talked about here. But that's why we're going to have many, many videos. I have at least 15 other videos planned for this, just in talking about character development and developing your storyline and making sure that we're doing our really awesome characters justice as we write out the rest of the story. So I'm pretty excited to get into it. I hope you join me next time. We'll be jumping right into how we start off developing characters who are fully fleshed out and three-dimensional, and who have some chemistry together. So we'll be talking about that next week. In the meantime, it is only 3 more weeks until The Other Lane goes live. I am so excited for you guys to finally be able to read it. I can't wait for it to actually be out there. I'm ready to do it now. It is on pre-order. I will have all of those links below. You can get it through Kobo, through iTunes, through Amazon, through Barnes & Noble. And the print is available too. If you would like a print copy, you can go to marlaholt.com, and I have a link up on my most current blog post about where you can grab the signed copy of The Other Lane for your very own self. I also have a link for that in my Instagram profile. If you follow me on Instagram, I am Marla Holt Author there. That link is also down below. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell me about your favorite romance novel. Tell me about what writers you like to read and what you look forward to most when you pick up a romance novel. And if there's anything you want to hear about and how to write a romance novel, if there's anything you're struggling with, let me know, and I will see about turning that into a video. I'd love to have a discussion down in the comments about your favorite aspects of romance novels, and just what you want to know about when it comes to writing a romance novel. Let me know. Subscribe, comment, like. I will be putting a playlist of this stuff together once I have a couple more videos up so that it'll be easy to find. Until next time, folks, see you later.